My name is Julien Bataillé. I'm a software development manager at Rakuten, and today I would like to talk to you about practical implementation of good security hygiene for mobile apps. David is from Critical Blue, and he will also be presenting with me today. And before getting started, I want to explain what kind of security measures we are discussing today. We will look into the communication channel between your API services and mobile applications running on Android and iOS. It's very common to share the same backend between a web app and a mobile app, but the security model is very different between those environments. So let's see what we can do to secure APIs when it's designed to be consumed by a mobile app. First, the most common way to secure the communication between an app and your backend is to use an API key. The app will attach this key in a header or a query parameter for every single HTTP request, and the backend will check if this key is valid to authorize a request. Kong makes it very easy to set up this kind of authentication using the key authentication plugin. So what's wrong with API keys? The first problem is that it's fairly easy for an attacker to intercept the key by monitoring the traffic between a mobile app and the server. Once attackers obtain this key, they will be able to perform requests to your backend, and it will become very difficult to distinguish traffic coming from your app and traffic coming from an attacker. And at this point, you are probably thinking, even if someone monitors the traffic, it shouldn't be so easy to extract sensitive information, since we are now using TLS over HTTPS for most of the communications between clients and servers. And this is true, and both Apple and Google are making sure to force everyone to use this HTTPS protocol by default. At least it's been the case for a couple of years. And Apple requires HTTPS since iOS 9. Android, it's been since 2018 with Android 9. But you need to remember that the attackers can run your app on their own device, where they can install a fake server certificate. So it's easy to use tools to perform a man-in-the-middle attack, and many developers are using those tools every day to troubleshoot their mobile application. A very efficient way to prevent this kind of attack is a technique called certificate pinning. Instead of trusting any valid certificate to establish HTTPS communication, you can restrict the app to trust only certificates known to be used by your servers. It's efficient to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, but unfortunately, it's not very practical to implement. I'm not talking about client implementation. Of course, there is some development involved, but both Android and iOS documentation will help your developers to overcome this challenge. The real challenge is more on your different teams to make sure they communicate changes like certificate expiring or certificate being revoked. So you need to put in place a process to ensure that when a certificate is renewed on your servers, every single versions of your clients in production are aware of these changes. If you don't, there is a risk to deny access to legitimate users. So at this point, we may want to avoid transmitting the API key entirely. This is easy to achieve using the HMAC authentication plugin of Kong. So instead of sending the key embedded inside your app package with every single request to authenticate, you can use this key to sign the request. And depending on the way you configure the plugin to generate the signature, it can also be a very efficient way to avoid request tampering and even replay attacks. So now we are confident we can protect against man-in-the-middle attacks. And there is no way an attacker will be able to extract sensitive secrets by monitoring the application traffic. But we still have a key embedded inside our app package. And this secret is used to generate, for example, our HMAC signature. So we need to find ways to protect this secret from being extracted from the application package. There are ways to make it more difficult for attackers. So techniques like code obfuscation, it's available, tools are available for this from the standard platform toolset or from third-party vendors. There are also techniques to recompute the secret at runtime instead of storing it as a static string in your code or application resources. But now we are entering a completely new domain, which is about protecting your app against reverse engineering. And unfortunately, many tools are available for this, and it's very well documented. In some businesses, it may be useful to protect your application source code against reverse engineering. But remember, we are only trying to protect a secret that shouldn't even be in our application to begin with. So what we really want to achieve is to find a way to verify that our API is really communicating with our app, and this app is running on a real device and is not being modified. So instead of a secret key to authenticate our application, what if we had a way to collect information about the application and its environment, send it to a service in exchange for a key? So this key could have a very short lifetime because now it's not hard-coded inside our application package anymore. And actually, Apple and Google provide this kind of services. We started to evaluate Apple's app attest service and Google's safety net attestation API. But we found limitations that make it very difficult to rely on those services as a standalone anti-abuse or app security mechanism. Instead, we worked with Approov to integrate their service in one of our apps on both iOS and Android. So this diagram here gives you an overview of the steps involved in Approov app attestation service. But really, on our side, all we had to do was to integrate their SDK. This is step one in this diagram. And to configure Kong with a JSON Web Token plugin. You can see on step 3 on this plugin, on this diagram. This is because Approov token is a standard JWT token. So thanks to that, we didn't have to make any custom development on our backend. And we found it was very efficient to use a single solution across both iOS and Android. And as a bonus, Approov provides a very practical solution for the certificate pinning problem I mentioned earlier. If you are interested to learn more about this particular topic, please check this blog post from my colleague Danny Smith. And now I would like to let David explain in more details how Approov works and what features are available.
Thanks, Julian. It's David Stewart here from Critical Blue. We are the company that develops, deploys, and manages the Approov API threat protection solution. Before going into a bit more detail on the solution, moving to the next slide, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the threats and what API abuse is, because sometimes this is not well understood, and you can find a quote from Gartner that says that API abuse will be the #1 cause of data breaches in 2022, and certainly there is a lot of this activity going on. I won't go through all of these, but the people will abuse APIs, and by abusing APIs I mean unauthorized access or using the API in a way for which it was not originally designed. And they do it for fraudulent reasons. They do it for messing around with services reasons. They do it to create fake accounts to collect, reward points. They scrape it for gaining competitive information and data, pricing, products, etc. There's all kinds of reasons. And the reason, fundamentally, the reason that people abuse APIs is because they can. And if they can, and if there's some money to be made, then they will do that. Within the class of APIs, mobile apps are the most difficult to defend against or to protect, simply for the reason that the client is in the hands of anyone can download it and spend as much time as they like studying it, reverse engineering it, doing what they wish to it. If we move to the next slide, I try to talk a little bit about how real is this threat. And the answer, sadly, is it's very real. And I just happened to pick an article recently from Nordic APIs that gives you an example of five such data breaches. And these are, big company names, but obviously this is something that happens on a day-to-day basis on all shapes and sizes of companies, not just big ones. So if you're exposing APIs on the internet, then this is a risk for you. And the other thing I want to mention is that often when we're talking about API security, people talk about exploiting vulnerabilities, flaws, bugs in your APIs. And that certainly is a threat, is a risk. But what I'm talking about here is not doing that, but rather impersonating API traffic. So pretending that API traffic is coming from a remote app client when it isn't. And it's very difficult for traditional security mechanisms to tell the difference between good traffic from apps and impersonated traffic from apps. And that's fundamentally why Approov exists. If we go to the next slide, the way in which you would defend against this kind of attack is to ensure that only genuine instances of your app can access your API. And if we start the animation, I'll give you a big picture of how this works. So if you have Approov in your app, when it starts up, it will communicate with the Approov cloud service, which will do essentially a DNA test of the app to make sure that it's present, to make sure it hasn't been changed. Then a short lifetime JWT will be delivered to the app, which it then delivers in the API header to the app backend. And there you can verify that the token is what you think it is, which means that you will then know that the API request actually came from a genuine instance of your app. Moving to the next slide, we'll dive into a little bit more detail. And luckily for me, Julian's covered a bit of this. So the picture is your app is the red thing in the middle, and the API we're protecting, your API, is going down the page towards your server, and you have something at the API endpoint like an API gateway, which is going to do the verification. And the important thing I want to mention here about the way this works is that the short lifetime tokens, which come from the Approov cloud service to the app and then get sent down the page to the API gateway, are 5-minute tokens, and we repeat the process every 5 minutes. So we re-verify, we recheck the DNA of the app every 5 minutes. The process itself is 100 to 200 millisecond process, so it won't impact your user experience at all. They won't even know Approov is there. And the other thing to note, as you can see from the diagram, is that the communication between the SDK and the Approov cloud service is not in the middle of your traffic. You don't have to route your traffic to us or anything like that. So it doesn't have an impact on the latency of your platform, either from a user perspective or from a back-end perspective. So it really is invisible as we move forward. So that's the basic idea of how it works. And when you've deployed it, if we move to the next slide, you will probably want to see what's going on, and you will get a lot from our dashboards. You will get a lot of information about who's, what your app usage looks like. So basically, this is just one of the screens you can use. But the top picture is the passes. So you're getting live data of showing you real, genuine apps using the service. You can see, your iOS, Android mix. You can see which versions of the apps are being used, etc. There's lots of information in there. And then the bottom graph is the failures. So there you can see what kind of threats are being repelled, reasons that devices are failing the check. So you might find that they're running on jailbroken phones. You might find they're connected to debuggers or hacking frameworks, etc. There's lots and lots of checks that we do here, and we'll give you the analytical information about what's going on a live basis. And that really helps you to see what's going on, but also to manage your responses to these kinds of threats. Now, moving on to the next slide, I just want to talk about a little bit about what the implications are for the mobile app developer. And this little code snippet on the right-hand side is really it. So you basically call the SDK from your app, and that's what the fetch approve token and wait command does, and it does the rest. So it does the communication with the cloud service, it does managing tokens, it does the DNA test, the integrity measurements that Julian mentioned, etc. And then moving to the next slide, we've got a wide range of support for app development platforms, not just the native Android and iOS, with a whole range of different stacks as well, but also some other third-party platforms. So we've got quick starts for all these, so you can basically get up to speed very quickly and get the integration done very fast with these. On the next slide, we'll talk about the backend implication. Again, it's a standard JWT token, so it's trivial again. You're basically decoding that token. You want to check two basic things. One, that's not expired because it has that 5-minute lifetime, and so you want to be sure nobody's trying to reuse tokens. And then you want to check that it's signed with the correct secret. And that's it. And if you pass those two checks, then you can process the API requests with a high degree of confidence. And so you can implement this in standard server environments. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the backends that we support. This is just a subset. There's a whole load more on the website, but these are just a collection of quick starts that we have for some platforms, and there's more. But today we want to talk about the Kong support, which is on the next slide. And with Kong, you have a couple of different options. You have the standard JWT decode plugin that Kong provides, and that's the one that Julian and his team used, which allows you to do the basic token checking, those two parameters that I mentioned, the expiry time and the token secret. But if you want to get more sophisticated, we've created an Approov specific plugin which has some additional capabilities where you can make use of some of the more advanced features of Approov to improve your security even further. There's quite a number of these, but I think the most important one, and probably the most common one that people use, is the token binding. So what that does is it allows you to bind the Approov token to some parameter or some piece of data. The most common example of that would be to bind the Approov token to a user authentication token or a username. And that means that you're basically restricting the use of that Approov token to that particular user. So if some other user presents that token, you're in a position to reject it on the basis that, yeah, it might be a valid token, but it's actually associated with the wrong user. So it's just a way of tightening up the security even more. So that's an advanced feature, and we'll probably be adding new features to that plugin over time. So that's that section. If we move on to the next slide, which I think is a summary slide, yep. Then yeah, I think the key messages that we want to give to you today is that obviously you're almost certainly familiar that you should be building security in discrete layers, and think about those layers separately. But we also think that you should recognize that the mobile channel is different, and it has its own characteristics and its own challenges that mean that you really should be building specific layers for the mobile side of your business. We talked about keys earlier on, and we talked about the fact that ideally you shouldn't store keys in apps, which is what everybody always says. But we know that there are occasions and there are times and there are needs that sometimes you need to do that. So what we're saying is that if you do need to store keys in the app, make sure that they can't be exploited at scale, meaning that they don't open up your backend without requiring some other factor to go alongside it. So obviously in the case we've been talking about today, the other factor is an Approov token. So the key is useless unless it has a valid Approov token with it. So something like that to make sure that even if your keys do get exposed, they can't be used against you at scale. That's a very important message that that you should get from today. And finally, just make sure that in your mobile channel, all the individual things that you have can be authenticated independently using separate processes and maybe even separate solutions. So if you separate keys and users and apps and APIs and authenticate them independently, that way you've got multiple factors for each of the use cases that you're trying to support, and that will really help to raise the bar of your security significantly. So that's all that we wanted to say today. There is some further reading here. There's a link to Julian's colleagues' dynamic pinning blog, and I've also put in a link to the Approov resources page where you will find all kinds of information about API security generally. There's videos, white papers, application notes. The quick starts that I mentioned are there, as well as our very active blog, and also all the user documentation as well. So you should, if you're interested in this topic, there'll be plenty for you to read there. And that's it for me, and we'll be available to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.